Now, the paper presentation, last paper presentation for today. Noura Shamsi Bahar. Noura Shamsi Bahar is a senior lecturer in the Department of English and Modern Language, North South University. So Noura Shamsi Bahar will present our presentation.
Okay, good afternoon, everyone. Since we're a little behind on time, I'm trying to cut my presentation as short as possible. And I'm not going to introduce the poet since she has already been introduced, but I feel honored to be here. Thank you, Dr. Murtaza, for asking me to do this. And so here I go. About a quarter of Fang-Tzu Chang's poetry deals with the overarching themes of colonialism, oppression, corruption, language as a career of culture, family, love, etc. So in this presentation, I will focus on the theme of oppression from inside and outside forces, particularly bringing to light maybe 4 poems. So the title of my presentation is Fang-Tzu Chang, the poet who wraps herself in a shawl of poetry, Hakka poetry. This is actually taken from a line in one of her poems, which I will discuss soon. So the first poem that I'd like to focus on is called The Taste of the Land. Here we see what I can assume to be colonizers exoticizing Taiwan through a very Orientalist lens, while exploiting the same land and oppressing its people at the same time. The colonizers claim that the land tastes fragrant is refuted in every stanza, beginning with an adamant and repetitive use of the word no, followed by the reality of how the land is in fact bloody, which symbolizes the use of force and violence on the part of the colonizers, salty from the tears of mothers who are perhaps mourning the lives of their children, sour from environmental degradation and disease, and out of breath because it is exploited. The breathlessness of the land could also symbolize how the people are suffocated by the overbearing hands of oppression. Holding guns and knives, hoisting banners, and kissing the land, all of which have been mentioned in the various stanzas, could all be seen as symbolic actions representing different forms of control and exploitation. And yet what remains intact, as we see in the last line of this poem, are the people's will and dignity. So the poem rejects the colonizer's narrative and brings Taiwanese resilience and struggle for sovereignty to the forefront. In a way, Chang is rewriting history, and her poem reflects the essence of Nigerian author Chinua Achebe's words, quote, "Until the lions have their own historians, the history of the hunt will always glorify the hunter," unquote. So the next poem, Give Way, is also on the theme of exploited land, but I will skip it. So moving on to the next poem, The Wall. This poem makes references to the 1947 Taiwan massacre by the Kuomintang, or KMT, the Nationalist Party of China, as well as the rebuilding of the Taipei city walls in 1945 after Taiwan was handed over to the ROC, Republic of China, from Japanese colonial rule. So the speaker talks about the colors of a particular wall in the first stanza, sometimes white, sometimes red, and eventually became black. These changing colors suggest a progression from innocence to bloodshed, and finally to the darkness of oppression and the silencing of people, which is further emphasized in the final stanza, where we have people who have mouths sewn tight, implying censorship. Moreover, the missing people could indicate those who have been made to disappear or those whose voices have been muffled. The darkness within is juxtaposed with the light that's beyond the wall, which sometimes shines through the cracks, and this may be symbolic of the hope for resistance. The speaker mentions visible and invisible walls, the former being a more literal barrier, but in present-day Taiwan, the latter, that is the invisible walls, are more applicable, which symbolize obstructions to attain a cultural and national identity. However, the people who get the long end of the stick pretend that nothing happened as it was silent, allowing the walls to figuratively block their vision until the walls crumble and freedom is achieved. This could signify the independence of Taiwan from mainland China or a broader hope for liberation and autonomy. But that being said, the speaker mentions that the walls have already collapsed and the encaged doves take flight. This is in the last stanza. And this suggests that the sewn mouths are now unsewn and the silenced voices have finally been set free, which could be emblematic of the democratization of Taiwan in the late 1980s. Okay, so moving on, while outside forces feel oppressive to Chang, which leads to themes of exploitation of land, oppression, struggle for national and cultural identity, as well as the need for liberation and autonomy, Chang also writes about inside forces that affect the Taiwanese people. So in the poem, My Clothes, it's probably one of my favorites, various items of clothing are used as metaphors for societal expectations that shape the poet or the speaker's identity. The overcoat called country is too tattered with rusty spots to protect from wind and rain. This might refer to patriotism and national identity being too inadequate to provide protection. Moving on to tights, the speaker says, the tights called mundane judgment makes one feel either too cold or too hot to breathe. One could think of tights inviting many kinds of reactions, judgment or objectification, both of which women are often subjected to. Judgments from people can feel cold, while too much unwanted sexual attention can make them feel overwhelmed. Next, the speaker refers to her bra. The brassiere, called a good woman, fetters the mind that desires to run free. The bra can be seen as a shackling of female sexuality, hiding her private parts, the sign of a good woman, according to society, which can often be an unattainable standard for many, if not all, women. The speaker thinks of societal expectations of a traditional woman as a fettering of her individual freedom and wishes to be free of it. In the end, she expresses a desire to not only be free from the patched clothes, but from clothes altogether, a form of liberation from patriarchy, walking in nothing but a shawl of poetry, which represents personal identity and creative expression. The speaker also makes reference to the 4 seasons, which may be suggestive of the cyclical nature of the discomfort and the frustrations with societal norms. It could also indicate that just as seasons change, she is also desirous of change. The next poem, Clause Stuck In on Dapu Controversy. This is about a specific incident that took place in Taiwan. So according to Taipei Times, on July 18th, 2013, 4 houses in Dapu Borough in Miaoli County's Junan Township were demolished against the will of the owners to make way for a controversial science park expansion project. So the roots of this incident go back to 2008 when an optical electronics company applied to the county government for land to build a factory on. But later on, this company said it no longer needed that land, but the provincial government still went ahead with the plan. And in the past, the government authorities have always viewed land expropriation as an example of good government because it provides some benefits to the landowners, so the landowners should not be opposing to the plan. However, contrary to the authorities' expectations, the residents of Dapu did not appreciate the district's plan, and they joined together to resist the proposed land expropriation. The provincial government didn't really pay much attention to them, and this led to clashes and lives were lost as well. So in this poem, as explained in a little footnote, clause refers to excavators used to destroy farmland and houses. The poem begins with an imagery of birds wailing while claws destroy farmland. A feeling of devastation and pain is felt with the descriptions of severed veins and crushed land. Chang questions the intention behind the demolition because we have, on the one hand, the fall of spikes of rice in juxtaposition with the growth of money on the same farmlands. This depicts a tug of war between agriculture and industrialization, the latter of which it has accelerated and continues to advance capitalism. So in the second stanza, Chang depicts farmers as innocent people leading innocent lives who were forced to protest in the capital city against these demolitions. And this implies that dire circumstances made the desperate victims feel compelled to fight for their rights, especially since they felt that they were being uprooted. And this brings to mind Antiguan author Jamaica Kincaid's words to mind, quote, "When I say I am filled with rage," the criminal says, "But why? And when I blow things up and make life generally unlivable for the criminal is shocked, surprised. But nothing can erase my rage, not an apology, not a sum of money, not the death of the criminal. For this wrong can never be made right, and only the impossible can make me still. Can a way be found to make what happened not have happened?" Unquote. There is a sense of betrayal experienced by the victims, as we later learn in the final stanza, that despite the farmers' loyalty to the government, the latter legally took away everything from them. Homes and farmlands were destroyed with monster claws, and here the claws can be, of course, both literal and figurative. Figurative because they are the claws of bottomless greed that devours anything that can be capitalized on, even if human lives get in the way. It calls to mind Frantz Fanon's words, quote, "The people come to understand that wealth is not the fruit of labor, but the result of organized, protected robbery," unquote. The poem offers us a critique of the oppressive government authority that abuses its power, especially when it comes to exploiting people for the sake of monetary gain. The government officials are shown to be indifferent to the suffering of the people, because they put their own interests before the well-being of the citizens that they're supposed to be serving. In hindsight, Chang offers a sharp critique of the government, calls to attention the need for accountability, and highlights the ordinary people's resilience in the face of crisis. So I think I'm going to stop here and just conclude by saying that Taiwan's struggle for complete autonomy no longer involves a struggle for decolonization or democratization, but for Taiwanization, which emphasizes identification with Taiwan, consciousness of Taiwan, and even a Taiwan nationalism. A glimpse of this struggle is apparent in Chang's poetry. Besides, the internal oppressive forces within Taiwan itself are also something that Chang is vocal about in many of her poems. Moreover, she advocates the revival of minority languages, which again calls to mind Jamaica Kincaid's words, quote, "The language of the criminal can contain only the goodness of the criminal's deed. The language of the criminal can explain and express the deed only from the criminal's point of view. It cannot contain the horror of the deed, the injustice of the deed, the agony, the humiliation inflicted on me," unquote. The agony of not being able to speak in one's mother tongue because of an established linguistic hierarchy and linguistic hegemony, this is best reflected in Chang's poem titled Hakka. And I'm going to quote just a couple of lines from that poem. "My mother tongue kisses my lips every day. It has never bitten them. How come they seem being run over, covered with livid bruises?" Thank you.